Welcome back to Anxiety Chats. Today we have another anonymous anxiety story.
We will be talking about experiencing anxiety in your teenage years.
As always, if you would like to be involved with us at Anxiety Chats, you can send us your anonymous story through the link in our description.
Or you can come on the podcast to chat with us in person. Go to the description of wherever you are listening to this podcast.
Let's just get straight into reading this anonymous story. You could say I'm kind of an anxious person. I know it. I first started sensing something was off during my teenage years. Yes, those years when we break free from structures and our parents and safety zones. Yes, as fun as that sounds, it was also a challenging time for me. As I started going to more adult parties, aka more alcohol and drugs, I started feeling something was off. I was feeling pressured to fit in, and in order to fit into this crowd, I wasn't particularly fond of, but didn't want to be an outcast. I started to feel like the world was closing in. I think this pressure and lack of structure was a huge trigger for me looking back. Every time my friends would begin planning for a party, my body would just tense up. I dreaded the weekend because that meant I had to go out. And I would actually set a timer to know when to get back home. I loved seeing it was late enough so it would be acceptable to leave and get back home.
But during the parties, my anxiety crept over me almost every time. I would start to get dizzy, my stomach would tie up in a knot, and my body was just screaming, "Get out," at every possible moment. Most times I had to escape to the bathroom to calm down. Truth be told, I used to drink a lot just to numb the feeling, but that didn't help. So, how did I figure out something was wrong? At first, my mind was going miles per hour as soon as I stepped into the party, and it got worse if it was a closed space. I would get that usual anxious feeling, but determined to stay, I would just drink it away. Yet, my body had other plans. My mind was now telling me every possible thing that could go wrong. I would get sweaty and cold, dizzy, and finally the cherry on top, I would get physically sick. After that, either I would go to the bathroom, have a meltdown, and go back to the party. Or in my best case scenario, finally go home. Exhausted. Seeing this as an adult now, I can see it clearly now that my body was clearly trying to tell me something that I wasn't listening. As I got older, I started listening more and more, and even though I still get that anxious feeling once I get to a new place, I understand it a lot better now and have better strategies to cope. If I could give just one message out there, it would be this one. Even though I still feel anxiety, I did get better. It helped me finally accept who I was, and it helped me live a better life. I truly believe that. So, sending much strength to everyone and good luck. Good things are coming if you give them time.
Oh, that was such a nice note to end on.
Yeah, I love it.
How did you, I'm just curious how, as a teenager growing up, were you, interested in parties or not?
I think I was a little bit it was a mix of feelings because in school I had different groups of friends. Like I had, my classroom friends who, sometimes because I went to a private school and it was like Catholic, they like to enforce control at all levels. So that included controlling who we sat with, so they would sit us next to people that were calm. They would just arrange them, arranged us themselves. So I, became friends with a lot of people that were not that popular. They were more chill, and that was fine. But then I also had this other group of friends who were more like a clique, and they were the ones that introduced me to parties and all of that. And I don't know, I think it was a mix of feelings because at points, like, I was a very down to earth person. Like, I like to just Netflix and chill, or the version of Netflix and chill back then, just movies and that. And that was fine for me. But then again, I did feel that pressure of my other group of friends, saying how much I hang out with my other friends and not with them. And so I kind of had to force myself a little bit to go out there and just socialize, even though I didn't feel like being in those spaces. But then, eventually got better and I actually enjoyed socializing. But yeah, I remember, I don't know what it is. I don't know if it was my anxiety or what, but whenever I would go into a place like a party that was full of kids that I didn't know, they were from other schools, like I would get that, and that feeling like, I have to introduce myself, like I have to actually
Mm.
socialize, because it's much easier to socialize with people you know. But
Hmm.
when you see people that you don't know, it's like, like it feels that I used to get that anti-social feeling, a little bit. So
Yeah.
yeah, I would get anxiety at times. I don't know if that happened to you.
Actually, the really weird and funny thing is, I've never been anxious around like socializing, which I think is why a lot of people are like, she doesn't have anxiety. Like, she's fine. She's always chatting to everyone. Like, it's actually kind of like a thing that like people are like, Emily will chat to anyone about anything. So growing up, I was
Hmm.
the exact same. I wanted to be friends with everyone, and I loved parties because I loved chatting to people. But the thing I hated about parties as a kid, as a teenager, is I have never drank. I have maybe been drunk twice in my whole life, and I'm 26, and I don't think I'll ever drink again. So at these parties, I was often pretending to drink. So I would like, I remember like I was at my brother's 21st birthday, and somebody bought me like a WKD, which is like total like kids drink. It's like 4% alcohol, and it tastes like it's blue, you know? And I
Garbage.
remember like
Or like just
gradually spilling
sugary.
it. Exactly. And I remember gradually spilling it
Yeah.
on the floor, like everywhere I walked. I would like drip, like spill a little bit out onto different parts because I was like, I really hate the thought of not being in control. And that's the same with like drugs, alcohol, anything like that. I've never been a fan of it because, like, even when I was younger, I smoked weed and had the worst reaction ever. Like, I've never heard of another reaction as bad as mine from just smoking weed. Like, obviously, my body is super sensitive and likes to be fully in control. And so, this story, like, I do resonate with in certain aspects of like, as a teenager, there's so much pressure constantly to do things you don't want to
Hmm.
do. And as an adult, we have the authority and like we can just say no, or we can make up an excuse, or we're not as terrified. I think as a kid, you think if you don't go to one party, then everyone is like, cooler than you, and everyone will bond and have more friends, and you'll just be a loner for the rest of your life. Like, you kind of don't see past school when you're at school. You just don't know there's anything different. So you just are terrified of
Yeah.
everyone being cooler than you. Social status is a big thing in school, isn't it?
It is so, I sometimes think about it and I'm like, why did I care so much? Like,
Yeah.
but I guess that comes with maturity, now you look at it from a different perspective and you're like, well, if I could, I was having this conversation with my sister not too long ago, and I asked her, if you could do things differently, if you could go back in time and do things differently in high school, what would you do? And she says, well, first of all, I would actually, for once, stop caring. Like I would actually just focus on being me, whatever that was at the time, express myself in the way I wanted to, or dress, or like do the things that
Mhm.
I would like to. Because at one point I think she was like playing the piano, and then her friends
Mhm.
weren't, and I think she left it, something like that. And I can think
Mhm.
of things similar. I can resonate with her in that sense. Like sometimes I didn't do things because I thought, oh, this is not cool enough, or like my friends are not gonna get it.
Yes.
Like, just I used to care so much, like, and now I'm like, well, then again, it's you as a young person, it's your younger person just learning, but I wish as teenagers we had that extra piece of knowledge, like it's gonna be fine, like,
Yeah.
you don't need to prove yourself to everybody, and force
Totally.
yourself to do things. It's so funny what you mentioned about drinking, because I'm not a big drinker either. Like, I think now that I'm much older, I definitely do not want to drink alcohol, and it's not because I don't particularly like it. It's just, one, I have gastritis, so like no alcohol for me, or else it feels like
Uh,
burning inside. But
yeah.
second, because I love what you said. I like to be in control of my body at all times.
Mhm.
And if for whatever reason I'm too drunk and I cannot control my body anymore, I get
Hmm.
my claustrophobia triggers, it gets triggered, like I need to get out of this body. Why can I control myself, like it's that
Yeah,
mindset inside of my brain that is like, you need to get out, and I can't. So
totally.
yeah, that for me is a problem.
Me too. I think with like taking drugs, like obviously growing up, everybody, well, a lot of people anyway, like kind of experiment maybe with drugs. And I was always the person,
Hmm.
the one person that wasn't doing it because I was like, what if I take something and I absolutely hate it and there's nothing I can do about it? If you've taken something, you have to just wait until it's out of your system, and there's no guarantee of how long that will be.
Yeah.
And then there's the come down or the hangover or whatever it is. And I find it hard to cope on a normal, regular day. If I don't drink enough water, I am not well. So I can't imagine myself like
Yeah.
super hungover. And you know what? It was actually quite good in some ways. You know, growing up, like all my friends know I don't drink. They don't care, obviously, but it's kind of it takes quite a lot of courage sometimes to say I don't drink because people like in Scotland, and I'm interested about what it's like where you live, but in Scotland, there's a huge drinking culture. Everybody drinks all the time. If you're meeting up with friends, you'll have a drink. And you won't just have a drink, you'll get drunk, like very drunk, you know? Obviously, this isn't everyone and absolutely everywhere in Scotland, but I'm pretty sure it's kind of notorious that Scottish people like to drink and they like to heavily drink. And so it's kind of like it is quite a statement and it's quite a big thing when you say, oh, I don't really drink. People are like, why? What do you mean you don't drink?
Yeah.
Like, well, what do you do when you go out or when you go to a wedding or when you go to a party? And I'm just like, I just don't drink, but I still have a really nice time. What's it like where you live?
Oh my God. Yeah. Peru has the same drinking culture. I think even to the point where people are starting to transition into like alcoholics. I mean,
Hmm.
I don't mean to include
Hmm.
everybody in this pool, but sometimes we joke around with my friends or even my family, like it's so strong. And yeah, the pressure. I remember when I was in my early 20s, like I would get so pissed because on one hand I wanted to hang out with my friends, but then on the other, every time I would hang out with them, and I said no thank you to alcohol, they would get like pushy, like, oh come on, just one drink, just drink for
Yeah.
me, like it's just like that pressure, and I'm like no,
Hmm.
like it's annoying that you keep asking me that. At times I had to do it because I was just so fed up of being asked, not, why am I the only person in the whole group that is not drinking? And it would be like such a
Totally.
debate, right? Or such a topic at night. And at times I think it would even make me seem like not fun or boring. So what I
Yes.
learned to do is actually, with time, throughout the years, what I learned to do is like if I'm gonna hang out with my friends, that specific group of friends, what I do is just go myself to the bar and ask for like a virgin drink. Sometimes I even
Hmm.
ask like this is how crazy it got. I would ask bartenders to like pour up a Sprite, right, with ice and like put a lemon or something on top to make it drink seem like it was like a cocktail or something, you know.
Hmm.
And I would be drinking like my supposedly, alcoholic beverage, and everybody would leave me alone. But just because I looked like I was drinking, But if I didn't have anything in
Yeah.
my hands, then it would be like, or if it was just water or like a Coke, it would be like, why are you drinking? Like, and it would be so
Totally.
annoying. I remember getting pissed at times. And I have a friend I mean, we're not friends anymore, but um I remember that she was the same and she would get so angry. She would actually verbalize everything that would go through her head. I remember one time they asked her, like, why aren't you drinking? Like, why don't you drink anymore? And she said something like, because I'm mature, like I have a life or something like, and that kind of offended them, but I was like, holy cow, you're my hero. Because, I would never say, like, I would always try to go through the polite route, and see like how I can go around the topic. But
Yeah.
yeah, the drinking culture here is big, and people are very pushy, can be pushy. Now I think now that
For sure.
we've reached 30, my friends have kind of like lowered their intensity towards making you drink. But yeah, it's strong. I can totally feel what you're saying.
The thing is, like, no, that really makes me so angry that you'd have to pretend to be drinking. Like, It's absolutely nobody's business whether you drink or not. I would never judge somebody for drinking too much or for drinking,
Yeah.
I would never ever judge anyone for how much or how little they drank because it's literally none of my business. And you never know what's going
No,
on in
the
somebody's
risks.
life.
Yeah.
Like, there's so many reasons why someone might not drink, including medication, or there might be so many reasons why somebody can't drink. And actually, there was a boy in my year at school who couldn't drink because he was on medication, and everyone left him
Mm.
alone because they were like, "Oh, he can't drink, so we can't force him to drink." I don't know
Mm.
what it is about people trying to push their views on other people. Who cares? Like, people are individual,
Right?
but it's I think as a teenager you think for some reason, you think I actually know everything and I am as developed as I'll ever be, because you kind of feel a bit like an adult because you're doing exams and you're doing all these kind of grown up things and you might have a job and you're kind of a mini adult, but actually you're not developed enough yet to kind of see that if you're in a bad group of friends, it will be over, or you can leave that group of friends and find other friends. Like at school, it's so much more difficult to imagine a life where you're not at school and where your life doesn't depend on people liking you.
Yeah. I love what you just said. Honestly, I don't know what it is really. But when you're an actual adult, you're actually the owner of your life, and you have so many more things in your mind, and like there's a point where you stop caring, right? And you're like now, if I were in a situation where somebody's pushing me, I'd probably be like a little bit more straightforward. But even in my early 20s, like it was such a hard thing for me to express that I think at one point I was like, why can't I just say I don't want to? Like, what's the problem with that? And I think I said it at one point, and I was like, but why? Like, and yeah, what you said, like, I don't know what it is about people that, they're so determined to like make you believe or do whatever it is that they want to believe or do. It's like projecting their beliefs or like intentions onto other people. And I'm like, I remember, struggling with that a lot, to the point that I would have to fake
Mhm.
it, like I would just like, all right, let's just cut the whole conversation. I would just like by myself go get a drink or something, and just make it seem like I was drinking, but I wasn't. How
Yes.
funny is that?
I know, and
Yeah.
it's sad because it's like, and this person's talked about like them physically not feeling good, like them feeling sweaty and cold and dizzy and not well.
Yeah.
And, you know, that
Yeah.
is a very big reaction. That is and like she said, the person has said, like, I know now as an adult that was something, my body was clearly trying to tell me something. And it's just,
Hmm.
I think we're kind of taught to not listen to our bodies and to think, like, no, but this is normal. Even if every single thing in my being is telling me I don't want to be here, it's normal to go to parties and you have to be normal. And that is so sad. Like, there's so many different ways to socialize, and it's not just
Yeah.
parties in someone's house drinking loads.
No, I agree. 100%. 100%. Yeah. um but I think, what I love about certain groups of people, like, and this is a piece of advice that I remember my mom at the time told me, when I was in school. um like, you don't have to just have one group of friends. You can have multiple groups of friends. And in
Hmm.
fact, it's actually fun to always surround yourself with different groups, because you can experience different things, see things from a different, perspective. So like, I would have friends that we would just like go eat, or like visit museums, or like go for walks,
Hmm.
treks, like, and it would be so much fun, and then like I sort of learned to kind of cope with this specific group of friends, because I really love a lot of these people, many of them. But at the same time, when I felt like it was too much, like, I would be like, all right, well, this weekend I can't hang out. I have this other commitment with and they sort of learned, they got used to the fact that, yeah, I actually socialize with other people. I had friends that were like very artsy, and like we would do
Hmm.
artsy stuff and kind of boho things, and it was fun. So I think it's always good for teenage. If I had to give one piece of advice to teenagers, is like to not close yourself to just having one type of or one group of friends. Like actually open your range, socialize with everyone, even with the kid that you
Yeah.
can imagine yourself being friends with. Because in the end, first of all, you don't know who they're going to become after high school. Like
Hmm.
the most interesting people I know now are the people that were not popular at all in high school. They
Yeah.
were, kind of the outcasts. And when you get to know them, it's like, oh, you're actually an interesting person. You can actually learn a lot from them, and actually gain
Yeah.
meaningful friendships out of that. So I would say that don't close yourself to just have hanging out with just one group of friends. And obviously, if it
Definitely.
doesn't feel right, if it's actually causing you to have anxiety, like actual panic
Hmm.
attacks, then that's your red flag. Like if your body cannot take it, then that's a big no. Like it's different when you're just like uncomfortable and you're like, all right, but I'll try. But if your body's actually
Yeah.
telling you or showing you distress, it's like, yeah,
Hmm.
maybe you really shouldn't be forcing yourself to that point.
And this person's also talked about, um, you know, being at a party and then drinking so much to try and numb the feelings, which is another kind of
Mm.
big thing that a lot of people might do. They might go the other way and think, I'm going to drink as much as I possibly can so that I don't feel anxious. And that might work in that moment. It might help to numb that anxiety. But I think, in the long run, that's not going to be useful. And there's people I know now that drank loads as teenagers and still have a problem. And that problem is much more big now. So it's if you are
Yeah.
somebody that is a young person and that, you feel like you need to take loads of things to feel not anxious, it's something to be aware of because that can really still go into your adulthood and, make things much more tricky.
Oh, for sure, for sure. I will say, like, have you ever had like a hangover, or have you ever drank so much that you woke up the next morning with a terrible hangover, that whatever you were feeling the day before you actually drank or had, took drugs, it actually felt so much worse. It's like
Mm,
multiplied by like 10. It's like, and that's why people say, like if you are depressed, for example, drinking will just exacerbate your depression.
mm,
Because what happens is like it feels right in the moment, it kind of numbs the pain, but the next day when you wake up and you're hangover, your body will actually feel whatever feelings you were feeling the day before, but like 10 times worse. And
yeah.
that's when you start building a habit, like an addiction, because you kind of need to drink again to do it again, and you have to do it again to. So it's constant drinking or like taking drugs or whatever it is that you need to do to
Yeah.
like numb that pain. So I think
Hmm.
at one point I felt that I wasn't exactly super depressed in high school, but I was starting to feel like anxious. I was starting to feel the symptoms of being an anxious person. So
Hmm.
but because I never liked really to be not in control of my body, what I did is look for other ways to numb the pain, I guess you could say. So a lot of
Hmm.
that for me was like doing artsy stuff, or like going for walks, or like, doing other stuff that didn't require me taking things. That was my,
Yeah.
I think, the only smart thing that I did, that I thought about.
Yeah.
Because otherwise, it can be tricky and it can be hard to get out of. Addiction during teenage years is also a big thing, and it can be even harder, I think, for parents to battle against that, because you don't kids hide so many things. Like I hid so many things from my parents, and they don't know. Till this day
Yeah.
they don't know. They have no idea, because kids are experts at lying, or like
They
pathological
really are.
liars.
And I think you
Yeah.
think like, oh, I'm only a teenager, so this can't be an issue. Like I'm drinking all the time or I'm drinking so much every weekend, but it can't be an issue because I'm only 15, 16,
Yeah.
17. But that's when these things
Yeah.
form sometimes. So it's
Yeah.
definitely something to be
Mm-hmm.
mindful of. But you know what? It's just every
Oh, for
single
sure.
person I speak to will say being a teenager was really, really, really hard. And one of the hardest parts of life is being a teenager and trying to figure things out and who you
Right?
are, what you like, who you like. Like, it's just, there's so many things to figure out when you're a teenager. So it's okay if it's hard because it is really hard.
Oh, I don't even know why is it like I'm guessing it's because you're just so vulnerable, right? So like
Mm,
you're in between, right? You're not a child, but you're not an
yep.
adult. So it's like you're hanging kind of like in limbo or something, And I feel like
Hmm.
that's yeah, I don't know why it's so hard, you know. But then
Hmm.
again, it's a beautiful, I think, stage of your life. I think
Mm,
it's time to be carefree and have fun and make mistakes, And I wish a lot of kids were allowed to do that, because the way things are
hmm.
going, kids are like I as you know, I work my one of my jobs here is teaching kids, and like a lot of these teenage kids are just so stressed, and when I ask them like what's going on,
Yeah.
why are you so stressed, and they're like, well, I have to decide what I'm going to study. A lot of them are in their senior years, so they're taking multiple tests, they're filling admission
Yeah.
forms, blah blah blah, and they're just like, aside that's one thing I notice here is that aside from their school, they have afternoon school that prepares them to enter college, and I'm like, but why isn't high school enough? And it's just the
Yeah.
pressure of parents, so I feel like kids now are not allowed to make mistakes compared to the past. I don't know, maybe that's my perception. Back in the days, I didn't care. Honestly, I didn't care in high school.
Yeah. Me
I
too.
couldn't care less about my grades. Yeah.
Definitely. Like there is such that's a really good point. I think there is like a new pressure as well on kids and not, it might not even be from parents, but like, they're really scared of everything and, they also have to be scared about the climate crisis and they have to be scared about, mental health problems and
Mm.
there's so many things for young people now to be kind of scared of. And even the other day I watched a TikTok of this wee girl who was like maybe 6 or 7 and she was crying and she was saying to her dad, I'm studying way too much. I'm studying way too much. Like, I need time to play. And it made me so sad that I was like, the only job of a 6 or 7 year
Mm.
old is to play. That is their only job and to have fun.
Yeah, to be
And it's the same with
happy.
teenagers. Like, obviously, it's important to do well and, but I think it's more important to have fun as a teenager and a young person.
Oh, for sure. I agree. But one thing I will say though is that I'm glad that now, even though there are so many things to be concerned about, um, and
Mm,
obviously social media doesn't help, which is something I personally didn't grow up with. Like I grew up with the internet. I had a computer that was like
mm,
the Windows 2000, I think. But
mm,
social media wasn't there yet. So it's not like I was
mm.
scrolling through reels or TikToks or like following
Yeah.
influencers all the time, So it's kind of like it was still a good era, I think. But what I will say though is that now mental health is a discussion. It's part of the conversation, and kids
Hmm.
now are not afraid to say, yeah, I think I heard the other day one of my students say, yeah, I'm just going through a little bit of depression. And it was like, it's okay. And her friend was like, it's fine, like it'll pass. And I'm like, how cool. Like if I had said that
Yeah.
earlier in when I was in high school, it'd be like, what? You're depressed. Like that was like, wow, you
Yeah.
have to see a psychologist, you have to see a therapist. Wow, there must be something wrong with you. Like that was the
Yeah.
view, you know.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Like, there
So
must be something really wrong with you if you're seeing a therapist.
yeah. But that's like no,
Totally.
no, and kids talk about it all the time. I've noticed, like even on TikTok, I notice people, teens, young people talking like, oh, you know what? I think, just giving their perception on mental health. And I'm like, oh, that's cool. That's really nice that now we're
So
talking
cool.
about it. We are giving, meaning to it, and understanding that unless you take care of your mental health, really all these
Hmm.
problems you have might continue to happen,
Hmm.
because it's so true. I think someone told
Yeah.
me, people go to the doctor for all kinds of things, but never
Hmm.
for their mind, and people are doing that now. So that's cool. At least teens have
It
that
is.
now, as backup.
Yeah, definitely. Yeah, this was
Yeah,
such a
so I
good
love
story
it.
to read. I really enjoyed this one.
Oh, me too. It was fun. It's fun to talk about your teen years and to see what people are going through too.
Definitely. And like I've said before, like it's funny how one person in Scotland and one person in Peru can have very similar experiences. Like we all kind of have very similar experiences in life, don't we?
Oh, for sure. I like to think, even though there are limits and like territories and countries, like ultimately, if you think about it, it's just like one huge piece of land where people are having similar experiences. We're just like very far
Yep,
from each other.
definitely.
Like, I don't know who said this. It was like, if you think about it, the planet is just like one rock where a bunch of people live. That's it. It was just us who decided to
Hmm.
give like territories, to divide, to create divisions, and like do all that kind of BS. But in the end, we all are the same. We're having the same experiences.
Yeah, definitely. And this proves it so much. Like I love that we're from different parts of the world.
Oh, I love it. It's cool.
Well, thank you very much for joining us today on Anxiety Chats. This was a great story. If you have a story about your teenage years, we would love to hear it. Or any other story, we would also love to hear it. Thank you very much for listening today, and we will see you very soon. Bye, everybody.
Yeah, we'll see you next time. Bye bye.